When I said, okay, what is this? What is Bitcoin? And I started doing some research. A few months before, with some conversations with friends, we said, oh, Bitcoin, it's very expensive. It's $300. So it was really, really expensive at that time. But then I said, okay, I'm going to jump on this and start working, connecting with people in the industry in Argentina. At that time, we were very few, but it was very, very energetic and with a lot of, vision of the future, of the potential of the technology because of our history. I joined this company for a few months, and then I realized that I wanted to learn more, and I didn't find any content in Spanish. So a few months later, I co-founded Betes en Español with a partner at that time, and we started creating content essentially based on the book from Mastering Bitcoin from Andreas Antonopoulos, the first version. So we started reading content from there, some videos on YouTube, and we created the first videos in Spanish in YouTube about Bitcoin.
And I think at that time, in general, Bitcoin content was quite rare, right? There was not a lot of videos. There was not a lot of things.
Yeah.
Like, I think for people that come into the space now, it's kind of hard to understand because there's so many Bitcoin-only content creators, Bitcoin-only podcasters, and back then there was this one book and there was some other things, but It was quite empty, right?
Essentially, so it was, very lonely trip, but we knew that we were that was important for the rest of the next years. And after many years, so essentially we create 24 videos And then we stopped creating content for 5 years because I started working on the industry in different companies. And that actually, those videos were generating views organically. And before restarting in 2019, because in 2019 I restarted to publish more content, but before, just with only 24 videos, we had 10,000 followers and many views. And also, I co-create BTC in Portuguese. So we create a few videos there, and there are only 10 videos that are published. But at that time, we recorded 20 videos, but we couldn't sell it to the sponsors because Bitcoin was going down, and there wasn't many support at that time for creating content. So yeah, it's been a wild ride since the beginning. And after many years, a lot of people of the community that are already working on Bitcoin or creating educational content or creating companies, they tell, oh yeah, I remember that I watched the first videos that I watched were from Betas en Español. So that's it's very good to hear that at some point we add value to them.
Yeah, really cool. And at that time, you also lived in Argentina, or you were already in Spain?
No, I lived in Argentina. Yeah.
So you lived in a time in Argentina where you discovered Bitcoin, where you also discovered the big problem with fiat currencies in the Argentine.
Well, actually, I discovered the inflationary problems before that, before Bitcoin. So as living in Argentina for like many years, I mean 30 when I was 32, I moved from Argentina. 34. I moved from Argentina. So at that time, I suffered many inflationary situations, and for me it was like, why my salary from one day to another, 1 week to another, just lost 30% of buying purchase, purchase power. So I was like, why is this? I just wanted to learn more. And then when I realized that Bitcoin was a solution for that, I said, okay, this sounds very interesting. And I can tell you a story, like, I was like 7 years old, and I used to work, my grandparents had a bakery. So I used to go there, and I help them, and I just, do clean some things and help them. And they pay me in pesos, Argentinian pesos. So at that time, I said, okay, I want to buy like a little toy, it was the Rambo toy, and I just want to do that. And I went to the toy store, and I said, okay, how much is this? And one day it was like 30. And I said, okay. 1 week later, I go back to buy it, and it was like 55. It was like, wow, what is going on? I cannot buy it now. So it was those type of issues that I was only 7 years, so it was like, it was very painful. So. And then we had other situations throughout our life. In 2001, we had one big devaluation at the beginning it was like 1 peso, $1, and a few weeks or weekend later it was $1 was, instead of 1 pesos, it was 4 pesos. So it was a chaos. And now actually, 23 years later, is $1 is 1,230 pesos. So you can imagine that, and it's so internally assumed and vivid for Argentinians that that is one of the reasons why Bitcoin it was so popular, or it is so popular in Argentina.
Yes, and how popular is Bitcoin in Argentina right now? Is it like, if you had to guess, an adoption rate is like more than 10-20%, or is it maybe even like around 50%?
No, so it's very low yet. It still is very low. So not many people accept Bitcoin. That's the truth. But it's been a change when stable coins arrive, because we had also throughout many of the history, many people, or I would say most of the people, think that the US dollar is like a good haven to save to store their savings. We Bitcoiners know that that is not the best solution, but many, in general, people think that US dollar is the best solution. So they usually started to be more users for stable coins instead of Bitcoin. So, but that's part of the evolution of moving forward to go from stablecoin to Bitcoin, and I think just the use of wallets, to be custodials, auto-custodial wallets, or non-custodial wallet. That's a big step moving forward from most of the people, and probably the next evolution step is going to be to just use Bitcoin. But for that, we need to wait some time. I remember in 2014, in January 2014, I went to the North American Bitcoin Conference. That it was the conference where Vitalik Buterin presented Ethereum. It was just a paper. And at that time, the main sponsor of the event was BitPay. And I remember listening to people and on the stage that, we're in 2014. By 2020, everybody is going to use Bitcoin. So that was the expectation, and we know that didn't happen. So yeah, I heard many how would you say that, many wishes to start. That it's very easy to wish something, to make it fast. But unfortunately, what I think is that one of the main handbrake that we have for a technology to be implemented is the human ability to accept changes. So that's we know that the technology needs to improve. It's improving. That's fine. But what I think is the hardest part is that the human adaptation to a change, and that is not so easy after so many decades of using one or centuries using one other system.
Yeah, it's interesting for me when I talk with people from Argentina or Turkey, where like there's a really high inflation rate, and they usually don't flee to Bitcoin. They more flee to like stable coins on USDC or something like that, because for them US dollar is like really safe, even though it still has quite a lot of inflation, but like not compared to the Argentine peso or the Turkish lira. So that's really interesting for me to see why people flee to the next better one and not to the best one. So like they kind of want to have a little bit better, not the best form. Like as you're from Argentina, like why do you think that is? Like why do people go to like, oh, let's go to the US dollar and not directly go to like, oh, maybe Bitcoin with US dollar? Like there can be an argument made like 90% in Bitcoin and maybe 10% with USDC to have like something short term.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, and that is the same question that I asked to my parents. Because why are you doing that? And again, that is so inside their mindset, and it's very difficult for them to change, because for many decades the best place was to buy US dollars and to have the bills at home, and without even in the bank, because they already didn't trust on the bank. And so so that's and there is some. For many years, the U.S. Economy was like the biggest one. It still is the biggest one, but we know that this might change. But there is some kind of how do you say that sense of they are doing things the right way, or they are doing things better than us. And at some point, it makes sense because you have the huge economy, worldwide economy versus Argentina's economy is very small. You have, you need to find something else that is stronger than you. So, and also it's accepted all over the world. So, and you can fly to Europe, you can fly to anywhere, to Brazil, and they accept dollars. Everywhere they accept dollars. So, yeah, and if the dollar, you have the US dollar like a bill, and it's much better than having a pesos that go up, that go down, and generally goes up because you need more pesos to buy one Bitcoin, $1, sorry. So that is something that it's complicated, and it's. I think over time is people are asking more questions, and I also I'm still crazy for many people because I just still after 10 years. So they just, they don't get it yet.
It's fascinating because especially if you see the purchasing power increase over 10 years in Bitcoin, it's like it's pretty obvious the best choice against everything else. And you talked about how people in 2014 said like, oh, in 2020 we will have mass adoption and then everything like that. Obviously that turned out to be wrong. What do you think is a realistic expectation of when we get to a point where most people have Bitcoin as a store of value and it's kind of getting more and more accepted in restaurants and bars? I mean, right now the store of value aspect really plays out quite quickly now with like companies coming in, ETFs coming in, and even countries with El Salvador coming in and buying Bitcoin. But what would you say is like a realistic expectation of when does this happen?
So I think it's about incentives. So I don't know. I don't have a timing. But if something really hurts on your business to your pocket, trust me that you are going to find whatever way you will have at your disposal to solve that problem. So if you have a bank account, you have money, and the government just said, okay, you cannot take that money. You just take 1% every week of that money. Trust me that you are going to start looking for other options. Okay, so that is what motivates Argentinians, because that's what happened in 2001. You couldn't take all your money off your bank account. Actually, they said you had US dollar in your bank account. You cannot take those dollars. So it was really, really complicated. So I think that if we have like a bad economical situation, that is going to open the eyes of many like regular people, people that have a bar, that have, they don't understand Bitcoin yet, and they don't care about Bitcoin because they are fine, they receive they earn money, they are fine, okay. And when you have some governments, or for some reason that they start having more restrictions on your money, you are going to start thinking, hey, why this is happening? Is there an option? And then they are going to start, thinking in alternatives. So not all the people, unfortunately, not all the people are interested in learning about finance or economics things. Unfortunately, and that is something that all of us that we are creating content, we are trying to learn ourselves and also to teach and to explain why it's important Bitcoin, why it's important to have your own custody of your funds, and why it's important to have privacy. So I think it's a matter of time. I think when something, I'm not trying to think like something like a big episode or catastrophic episode happen, but when like that's analogy with the frog, with the water that is getting cold, and then it suddenly that dies, and if you jump to the hot water, just realize that don't need to be there. So when something really start to disincentivize people to use the current system, then they will find. I am the Venus of the night.
Yeni Nescafe Express Coconut'te Hindistan cevizi ve badem tadıyla buz gibi gerçek kahve lezzeti.
Then they will find Bitcoin.
It's really interesting with the frog, and it's interesting. I looked that thing up once. If it's actually true with the frog, if it actually stays in the water, it turns out it's actually that the frog will jump out at some point. Like there was like a research group that actually tried that out for some reason.
Nice.
So that's also my hope. That's also my hope that the people. Don't burn in fear, but at some point just jump out. And it's interesting when we think of people now fleeing to the US dollar, even in Argentina and other countries, they flee there because they don't have a choice somewhere else, and US dollar seems to be the next logical thing. But what if the US dollar is like the peso today? What if the US dollar, and the US dollar is still the best one, but it has already this 100% or 150% of inflation? Then it's interesting, where will people go? Will they go to buy gold? Will they go to buy some meme coin, some shit coin? I don't know. I don't think so. I think they will go to Bitcoin, because at that point, Bitcoin is probably already very big and is probably way stabler than any other fiat currency. I think that could be that frog moment of the frog jumping out of that hot water, and hopefully people go to Bitcoin. So I like the analogy with the pain that you made. Like the pain is not high enough for people, and the pain gets higher, then people jump out. But it's hard to say when the pain will be that big. And yeah, if what Bitcoin also then does to the fiat currency, because a lot of people argue that Bitcoin actually will make the fiat currency medium term better, as they all of a sudden have serious competition with Bitcoin, and people actually have an exit wealth with Bitcoin. So that's interesting to witness, and I think the next 10 years will be funny.
Let me tell you one story that for me was very surprising. I'm giving some in-person courses, and I had 2 people in the last course, and those are from the real estate industry. They have a real estate company, a small company, but they buy and sell, help buyers and sellers, And I asked them, why are you learning about Bitcoin? And they said, because there are some customers that want to sell their homes and buy Bitcoin. So they want to know how to do that, how to manage that. They want to know what is transaction, how does it work. So we are seeing some small, facts that this is slowly changing, and there are some people realizing that something different needs to be done.
Absolutely, and it's interesting the comparison of like getting to real estate all of the sudden. From real estate all of a sudden to Bitcoin, I had like, I don't know, probably like 20 guests already on that came from real estate and actually then got to Bitcoin because they were like, oh, Bitcoin is actually like real estate without the headache.
You will have one headache every 4 years, but then you will have many happy part times all over. Definitely, we are seeing that trend, and I think slowly, and then suddenly things are going to happen. I remember in 2013, 2014, many people said, "Oh no, this is we're gonna have a government buying Bitcoin or companies buying Bitcoin." It was like I didn't understood at that time. I didn't understand at that time. So it was really I was amazed of those guys at that time. They were just saying, this is going to be huge, and I wasn't 100% sure, to be honest. But then learning more, asking people, going to conference all over the world, and that's I think it's been a very, very interesting journey. And one of the things that I wanted to I don't know if this happened to you, but one of the most, or I would say the most interesting things of this is the quality of people that you meet in all events, and the stories, and why they are in Bitcoin. And it's very interesting. And I've been having, and I met many people all over the world, very interesting people, and always open to do business or have a conversation. So I think the community, the Bitcoiners community, I think is also one of the biggest strength of this technology.
100%. The community is amazing. I love it so much. You meet really great people in there. And one thing that I also want to touch on, because I think that's especially if you're new people that come now in this scene, a really interesting insight. You said before when Bitcoin was at $300 that you felt Bitcoin is expensive, which from the perspective from now feels like that's ridiculous. Like $300 is like so cheap in Bitcoin terms. But it seems to be like everyone always feels that Bitcoin is expensive whenever they join. Even it was like at $1, $2. They're like those tweets are like, oh, wow, Bitcoin is already at like the US dollar level at $1. Like it's always feels like expensive. Like, first of all, like, why do you think that is, and why do you think that's not true?
Yeah. There's a say there in the community, you deserve the Bitcoin that, the price of the Bitcoin that you deserve, So there are so many ways to think Bitcoin when you think it from the conversion of energy into something to value. So it's so profound, and it's so big that we still don't realize that. I remember to those same guys, those friends. I think it was in 2020. And the Bitcoin, it was around 10,000, and I said, but I think it's a great opportunity here, because probably your sons are going to ask you why you didn't buy Bitcoin when it was 10,000, and they didn't buy yet, and it's 68 today. I think I know the guy that I talk about pricing on my channel, because I don't do an price analysis. I think it's obvious that it's going to go up. So a price analysis 10,000, and they didn't buy yet, and it's 68 today. I think I'm not a guy that I talk about pricing on my channel because I don't do an price analysis. I think it's obvious that it's going to go up. And I don't do that. I just teach people how to use tools for using Bitcoin. For me, right now Bitcoin is cheap also. It depends on your mindset, and I think that's definitely what changed. What those big funds are doing. They are buying tons of Bitcoins, thousands of Bitcoins, because they changed their mindset. They changed their view of the technology or on the potential of this. So to be honest, I don't know why people that don't want to buy Bitcoin think that they are more clever than those guys. At that time, they are really focused on that. They have teams of people studying things and new things, and so wow, we will see.
If you watch my podcast already for more than 2 times, you know how extremely passionate I am about self-custody. And the first very, very, very important step to self-custody is always getting yourself a hardware wallet. And I have one for you here. This is the Bitcoin only edition from the Bitbox, my favorite single signature hardware wallet on the market. Another really important piece of self-custody, if you have a hardware wallet, is the backup of the seed phrase. And Bitbox made the perfect solution to back up your seed phrase. They made a reusable steel wallet. Check out that beauty. It's durable and extremely heavy. If I put it on the desk, I seriously fear for my own table. It's so heavy and durable. I love it. This is where my seed phrase is secure. Go to bitbox.swiss/Robin to get your Bitbox. And if you use code Robin, you even get 5% off of your complete order. And the next step is to really level up your sovereignty as an individual. You have to have the most secure self-custody setup. You have to secure your own devices. You have to protect your privacy. You have to set up an inheritance plan. And depending on where you live, you even want to have a plan B, a citizenship where you can move in case something goes really, really wrong. And through all those steps, the Bitcoin way is guiding you through step by step. And if you visit the bitcoinway.com/partners/Robin, you even get a 30-minute free call to find out how you can level up your sovereignty. And last but not least, I have something completely new for you guys. I partnered up with Coin Vigilante. This is the most beautiful Bitcoin timepiece that I ever saw created by anyone. Look at that beauty. I love it so much. Coin Vigilante made a perfect Bitcoin watch. That's the perfect, subtle, elegant way to go out there and show that you are a Bitcoiner. And that watch brand is Bitcoin only. And Coin Vigilante just dropped a completely new and amazing Genesis edition of their watch collections. You have the date of the first ever mined Bitcoin block in there. And of course also the block height and which epoch we are currently in. I love the level of detail they put in this masterpiece. And make sure to check out those amazing Coin Vigilante timepieces down in the descriptions. I love those watches so much. Absolutely, that's an interesting thing. Like the people always come into Bitcoin and they think they can fix it. They can think that no, it's not that, and they always think like, oh yeah, I discovered what's wrong with Bitcoin. All the people before never discovered that. They are not as smart as me. So that's a thing that most people when they come into the thing. Also really interesting, I think you, in one video I saw that I let transcript from ChatGPT because I don't understand Spanish. I think you talked also about human rights and how Bitcoin is a tool for that. Is that right, or was there a translation error?
We are ETH.exe. future, humanity is on the brink of extinction. We will protect this world from monsters. Show no mercy. Take it down.
Brace yourselves for a rocket-powered dose of nostalgia. Only one? But I want to shoot more.
The best medical care I can provide is taking the problem out at the source.
Target my sights. Right where I wanted you.
The future is bleak, but Lily AI has sent us here to change that. With this team, I think we might just be able to pull it off. Much of our knowledge has been lost to these monsters.
So we came up with a plan.
To become the hope for our future.
To save our world.
We are going to the past. See you in rings.
Translation error.
I think I talk about it. Yeah, I honestly think that is it's a good tool. Again, Bitcoin is a tool to so I think it's a tool that can be used for as a human right. Yes. I don't remember where I said that, to be honest, on the video, but definitely is something that allows marginal people to live. And we are seeing this in Venezuela. Venezuela is a worst case, or at least I don't know about Turkey because I don't have connection. But in Venezuela, I know many people that because of they leave Venezuela. And also, I know stories about people living in Venezuela with Bitcoin and, working, receiving Bitcoin and paying stuff in Venezuela. And they live like rich people because that solves a problem. The Bitcoin solves so many problems that that you can see from many different aspects because you can solve the problem of restriction to access to your money. You can solve the problem of inflation over time. You can solve the problem to send money from one place to another. So you solve many problems that unfortunately we as humans we already have. I was reading to the Human Rights Foundation website the other day, and they say that 50% of the population is under authoritarian government, right? Probably because of China or Russia, population, they are big. I'm not sure about those statistics, but it's a huge number. I mean, it's not 10%, it's not 20, it's 50. So definitely the Bitcoin is a solution for many of them. And we are seeing other use cases that we already don't know what is happening.
What do you think is the role that Bitcoin plays in that sovereignty mindset? And do you also have like other things that you say like, if you have Bitcoin, that's great for your money sovereignty, but you also need like some other tools that you kind of discovered?
Yes, that's been a journey for me also, because when you realized about privacy stuff and and security. So your rabbit hole is bigger, and many. So yeah, I think what I first of all, you we need to start with the very essential things, and many people don't use these very essential tools like a password admin or password generator software, for example. How do you say it? Password is for example, I use Bitwarden.
Oh yeah, password manager.
Password manager, yeah. So that is so essential for not only Bitcoin. I mean, Bitcoin is just a small part because obviously you're not going to put your seed on a password manager, but this digital environment that we are moving every day more and more, you need some very basic things, and you don't even have a password manager. So I think to have a higher level of sovereignty and privacy, you need to start doing layers and layers of things. And what I suggest to people is to go to a password manager today. Don't waste more time. At the beginning, I didn't want it to change, but then it was before and after for me. And then start using 2FA, double factor authentication to everywhere as much as you can without SMS, just the authentication tools. And then in terms of the mobile phones, I'm an Apple user so far, but I've been, I need to make my time to migrate to some other stuff like Graphene OS. I don't know if you heard about it. Yes, so I think that's a much better solution in terms of privacy. So that is something that I have the phone here actually. I have it here. I have a Pixel, but I have it for a few months. I didn't have a time to do the tutorial, but definitely, that is something that I wanted to do. It's not Bitcoin related, but it's more privacy and self-sovereignty tools. And so I think they go hand in hand, both topics. And at the end, what you want is to have a human that is going to be able to do whatever he wants without any limitation, especially from governments.
Yeah, it's interesting. How important, I think most people are very convenient with their digital lifestyle and they use whatever their OS is, sorry, their OS is suggesting them. So they use the password managers that Apple and Google provides for them. They use two-factor authentication only if they are asked to do that and those basic things. Why is that so important for someone to do the basic security, to do the basic privacy, and why could it be very critical in the future?
So essentially, because of history, and history tells us that those databases are stolen, are being hacked, and essentially for a hacker to access to that information, to the password, to an email, is going to be easy. It's relatively easy, and it's going to be easier over time. And for the hackers, it's very easy to say, okay, if this user have this email for this bank, probably what happen if we create a bot, and instead of checking if this email and password goes to this bank, what happens if we try this in thousands of banks? If we try this same combination into thousands of social networks accounts, What if we do this with thousands of exchanges all over the world? And it's very easy to do it. So you program something and you take a database from thousands and millions probably of combination of password and emails, and you just do that. So that is very easy. And if you repeat your password all over every time, I think that is. I used to do that in the past, and I just realized that that's the worst situation. And because that is really easy. And I have a family group, and some people say, I created one account here, and I always remember the password because it's the same that I use everywhere, and it's a problem because I wrote it down in a note, in a pencil, in a pen. If I lose this book, little book, you lose access to everything. And I actually send them, hey, I did a tutorial about it. So I just send it to my own family, and then I said, oh, well, thank you. And I bet you that nobody did it yet because I didn't receive any question. So for sure, they didn't do it. And they have the information, and it's very, very easy, and it's free. You don't have to pay for anything. It's your time only. So again, it's about changing how the minds of the human work and how they just want to say, oh, nothing happened to me so far, so, everything is good. And sometimes happened to me with other stuff. But we need to fight those kind of tricks of our mind that, wanted to auto-convince that everything is okay, when definitely it's not.
That's really interesting. We kind of have to really get down the rabbit hole and say oh, my security, my safety is really important, and we have to do something for that. I think that's really important to do. For the podcast, we have one more topic that I really want to get into, the adoption curve of Bitcoin moving forward. We did it already a little bit before. We talked about what adoption barriers could be in Bitcoin, how you see the future of it. One interesting question that I was thinking of, when you could design a world where you could from scratch do a society, you can design something that is completely new around Bitcoin, and maybe then we can also go into how can maybe in the future a Bitcoin world look like, or where more open source and more decentralized networks, maybe even with Nostra, can interact. How do you envision that kind of a future? How do you see a world where Bitcoin already succeeded, no matter when this is, probably some years out, and where open source and privacy and security is really on the forefront of everyone's mind? How do you envision that?
That is a very deep and interesting question. I never think about it. What I did is I participated in some conversations of people that wanted to create a community, a small community with Bitcoiners that shares the same values. So if I wanted to create those kind of stuff, I think there are kind of two big topics to talk and to set at the beginning. One is going to be the values that you want to share within that community and that population. I think that's the basic thing that allows a population to have some stability and some common sense and some framework. And the other thing is incentives. How the incentives are going to work, because you need to have incentives for people to invest in that community, and you need to have incentives for being governed in X way, in a way that everybody, or not everybody, or that makes sense for everybody, and essentially learn from other experiences. I remember when I used to work at Consensus. Consensus. That was my era in Ethereum ecosystem. So I used to work there. I worked for a year, developing the business in Mexico and Colombia and Central America. And at that time, I remember, everybody, let's do very decentralized company and let's do everything, on your own with your team, etc. And it was like an ideal dream of the company. And then I remember that there is a book. I don't remember the name, but there is a book that talks about decentralized organizations. It was written by a French author. I don't remember the name, but so I'm bad with the names. But I remember that we were about to have a call with this guy, with the author of this guy, and I read the book and I learned of the experience of groups, small groups. It was like auto-organized, and they achieved a lot of very, very, very, very high standard things, and it was really, very interesting.
Çiçek sepetinde lezzet dolu çikolatalar, şık kutuları ve aynı gün teslim seçeneğiyle seni bekliyor.
And it was really, very interesting. And we were about to have the call with this guy, the week after, 1 week late after that time. And I confirmed, I want to participate. And let's say that was in Monday or Tuesday. And that weekend we had an event in Chile. And I remember that we went to that event that was on Friday. We set the stage, we had our booth with everything, and we were there talking with people, projects, etc. And then at the end of that day, they told us, okay, tomorrow 9 a.m. we have a meeting. It was like, okay, let's have a meeting. We have a meeting. Essentially, we were all fired from the company. Just like that. And we had the booth there, with the company. And, we said, okay, we are not part of this company. And because they just let people go from many, many places all over the world. The company was really big. Price of Bitcoin of crypto in general went down. And so they reduced staff. They did a huge reduction of staff all over the world. And unfortunately, I couldn't go to that meeting with this guy of the decentralized organization because of this. I'm not sure that meeting was done, but that was a huge, learning process, because if you want to have the ideal society, the ideal community, it's not easy. But I think if you have like those values that you share, and you have the incentives correctly aligned, I think that there are higher chances that you can make a community more free and with a higher level of happiness or fulfillment of the individual that lives there in that community.
Was that book Reinventing Organization?
Yeah.
Like ChatGPT is amazing.
There you go.
I basically
Thank
just
you.
like a book about decentralized organization by a French author, and it's like, that's it.
Thanks, ChatGPT.
But yeah, it's an interesting insight. I think the future will be quite interesting. I love to think about the future generations and how we will deal with stuff when Bitcoin and all those open source things actually succeed, and we can move on from the world that we live today to a completely new world. But it will be a long transitioning time, and let's see if I can even live in that time, if I live that long. Really good. Yeah.
Yeah, what I've learned is that we all imagine those situations or those community ideal communities. I think that is something that it's been in the human brain throughout history. And the thing there is going to be that, okay, let's say that you create your ideal community, but definitely that ideal community is going to be connected in some way with the rest of the world. So, yeah, how do you do that? And you can see those examples of those community of, I forgot the name of those small community, religious communities that, for example, move from Europe to Latin America, and they work on the land, and they have their own thing, and they are happy with that. And over time, they learn that need to be open with the society to learn to sell their products, everything. But they keep those values, and they keep the incentives aligned at some point. So I think it's very interesting to learn from them. And they are really successful. For example, in Mexico, they started. They told them, hey, get this land for free, and it was very arid land. Over years, decades, one of the biggest fertile land in Mexico, because they work every day, and they just wanted to have one objective, and and now it's very very big business for them.
Do you think on that note of future civilizations, is Bitcoin ready to be multiplanetary? Is Bitcoin ready to be a currency that's not only on Earth successful?
So I think it's going to be a matter of communication. How do you communicate the blockchain? Or, how do you communicate in between planetaries at some point? Maybe you can do like side chains in each planet. I don't know, and they communicate because you have the light. The restriction there is going to be the light speed. So I guess I'm not a scientific, but I think that eventually is going to be a need in many years from now.
Absolutely, really cool. I just wanted to throw that in because we talked about the future, and it's a question I think that's really interesting to think about, but not something that concerns us in the near future.
Yeah.
A lot of people are outside of the Earth. Really cool. Before we go to the end routine, I always have one question that is always the same for every guest. What can we learn from you besides all the things that we already talked about?
Well, related to Bitcoin or to other stuff?
Or whatever you want, like outside of Bitcoin is perfect.
Okay, good. Yeah, well, so related to Bitcoin, what you can learn from me, I mean, if you have, I drop most of my knowledge naturally, it's a studying process into the YouTube channel with many hundreds of videos, and we learn how to use tools and tips for using Bitcoin in Spanish. But naturally, that is going to over the next few months or years. That is not going to be a restriction because everything is going to be translated into whatever language that you want to listen to it. So eventually the language is not going to be a barrier. So if you want to have like high quality videos, tutorial videos, that would be an option. Some people tell that I'm the best sessions or in Spanish with steroid. I heard about but I don't consume steroid. And I think Ben from Better Secession is doing a great job in English. He's great. So that's regarding Bitcoin. And well, one of my passions outside Bitcoin is sailing. So I love sailing. So I can teach people to sail and do stuff on the water.
Sailing is really it's interesting. But not with motor, like just with the wind, right? Sailing.
Sorry.
With the wind and not with the motor. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, with the wind. Yes, and that actually I didn't realize, but that actually is an expression of freedom, because at 500 or many more years ago, it was a technology that people used to have freedom or escape from stuff, and I think Michael Saylor has a boat on the back or on its office, and he talks about that was a technology. That's very interesting analogy and
Turkcell'in büyük 30. yıl çekilişini kaçırmak istemeyeceksiniz. Siz de her gün Turkcell mağazalarına gelin, her gün çekilişe katılın, 3 adet top ve yüzlerce hediyeden birini kazanma şansı yakalayın.
Turkcell'le bağlan hayata.
İnternetinden yemeden sınırsızca TikTok izlemek için Vodafone Red'e gel. Eylül ayına özel sınırlı süreyle geçerli bu ayrıcalığı kaçırma.
Having a boat in the backyard to drive away all the time. That's a good way to secure yourself.
Travel. You go sailing and then you lost all your Bitcoin because they fall to the sea.
But this is the one thing. I mean, it's kind of because that's the one argument I would not use. Like, if I want to be a criminal, if I want to say like, oh my I don't have access to my Bitcoin anymore. I think a really bad thing to say is like, oh, I lost them in the sea, because then they cannot move anymore. And if they actually move again, then they're like, oh, why did they move again? So then they have questions around that. But maybe a better thing is to say is like, oh yeah, they got hacked or something like that. That's a better way. So all the time when I see some public story on Bitcoin, my Bitcoin got hacked, and I'm like, maybe he just like needs public backing for that story.
Yeah, you never know about it, and that is a huge thing for inheritance. Inheritance is a huge topic, and I've been learning about it. I recently published a video about 3 options, and there are so many other things to consider. So that's another thing for another topic.
We're already at 1 hour, but I think I saw that video. You talked about Casa Unchained and a third one, right?
And Nunchuk,
Nunchuk, yeah. Really cool. Yeah, I think they're great options if you want to have collaborative multisig, and with collaborative multisig, then inheritance also gets easier. I think it's a great option to consider if you want to do that.
Yeah.
Really cool, perfect. And thank you so much. We have now our end routine where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest actually is. The question for you from the previous guest is, what needs to happen that you change your mind on Bitcoin and you sell it all?
Very interesting one. So, the only reason why I would change or sell Bitcoin is because the energy is zero. If the energy goes to zero, okay, I will sell my Bitcoin. The energy in the how do you say that? In the existing space. So that is going to be probably zero chances. But essentially, because of the energy, if we have no energy, we have no Bitcoin.
You mean the energy and electricity going off worldwide, or nobody's mining anymore?
No planets, no stars bigger than that.
Oh, so like that complete. Oh yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
I think then we have different problems, right?
Yeah, interplanetary Bitcoin. So because essentially it's energy. So it's energy you can find not only in the world, in our Earth, you can find it in many stars if you want. Thousands, millions of stars. So we don't know the limits.
It's an interesting question to think about. Yeah, thank you so much, Joaquin, for being on the show. Where can people find you when they want to ask you questions? Where can people watch your stuff?
Yeah, so you can search for BTC en español, and the user in X or Twitter, BTC en español, and we are also in TikTok and in Instagram. But essentially, if you want to have a conversation, go to X or Twitter, and we can have a conversation there.
Really cool. Thank you so much for being on. Also, thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening. As always, I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bir çocuk doktoru olarak Sebamed Baby ürünlerini tüm aileleri tavsiye ediyorum.
What does it mean to have a Bitcoin? Many people have heard of Bitcoin, that it's a fully digital currency with no government to issue it, and that no banks need to manage accounts and verify transactions. And also that no one really knows who invented it. And yet, many people don't know the answer to this question, at least not in full. To get there, and to make sure that the technical details underlying the answer actually feel motivated, what we're going to do is walk through, step by step, how you might have invented your own version of Bitcoin. We'll start with you keeping track of payments with your friends using a communal ledger, and then as you start to trust your friends and the world around you less and less, and if you're clever enough to bring in a few ideas from cryptography to help circumvent the need for trust, what you end up with is what's called a cryptocurrency. You see, Bitcoin is just the first implemented example of a cryptocurrency, and now there are thousands more on exchanges with traditional currencies. Walking the path of inventing your own can help to set the foundations for understanding some of the more recent players in the game, and recognizing when and why there's room for different design choices. In fact, one of the reasons I chose this topic is that in the last year, there's been a huge amount of attention and investment and, well, honestly, hype directed at these currencies. And I'm not going to comment or speculate on the current or future exchange rates, but I think we'd all agree that anyone looking to buy a cryptocurrency should really know what it is. And I don't just mean in terms of analogies with vague connections to gold mining. I mean an actual direct description of what the computers are doing when we send, receive, and create cryptocurrencies. One thing worth stressing, by the way, is that even though you and I are going to dig into the details here, and that takes meaningful time, you don't actually need to know those details if you just want to use the cryptocurrency. Just like you don't need to know the details of what happens under the hood when you swipe a credit card. Like any digital payment, there's lots of user-friendly applications that let you just send and receive the currencies without thinking about what's going on. The difference is that the backbone underlying this is not a bank that verifies transactions. Instead, it's a clever system of decentralized, trustless verification based on some of the math born in cryptography. But to start, I want you to actually set aside the thought of cryptocurrencies and all that just for a few minutes. We're going to begin the story with something more down to earth: ledgers and digital signatures. If you and your friends exchange money pretty frequently, paying your share of the dinner bill and such, it can be inconvenient to exchange cash all the time. So you might keep a communal ledger that records all of the payments that you intend to make some point in the future. Alice pays Bob $20, Bob pays Charlie $40, things like that. This ledger is going to be something public and accessible to everyone, like a website where anyone can go and just add new lines. And let's say that at the end of every month, you all get together, look at the list of transactions, and settle up. If you spent more than you received, you put that money in the pot, and if you received more than you spent, you take that money out. So the protocol for being part of this very simple system might look like this. Anyone can add lines to the ledger, and at the end of every month, you all get together and settle up. Now, one problem with a public ledger like this is that anyone can add a line. So what's to prevent Bob from going and writing Alice pays Bob $100 without Alice approving? How are we supposed to trust that all of these transactions are what the sender meant them to be? Well, this is where the first bit of cryptography comes in: digital signatures. Like handwritten signatures, the idea here is that Alice should be able to add something next to that transaction that proves that she has seen it and that she's approved of it. And it should be infeasible for anyone else to forge that signature. At first, it might seem like a digital signature shouldn't even be possible. I mean, whatever data makes up that signature can just be read and copied by a computer, so how do you prevent forgeries? Well, the way this works is that everyone generates what's called a public key private key pair, each of which looks like some string of bits. The private key is sometimes also called a secret key, so that we can abbreviate it as SK while abbreviating the public key as PK. Now, as the name suggests, this secret key, it's something you want to keep to yourself. In the real world, your handwritten signature looks the same no matter what document you're signing. But a digital signature is actually much stronger, because it changes for different messages. It looks like some string of ones and zeros, commonly something like 256 bits, and altering the message even slightly completely changes what the signature on that message should look like. Speaking a little more formally, producing a signature involves a function that depends both on the message itself and on your private key. The private key ensures that only you can produce that signature, and the fact that it depends on the message means that no one can just copy one of your signatures and then forge it on another message. Hand in hand with this is a second function used to verify that a signature is valid. And this is where the public key comes into play. All it does is output true or false to indicate if this was a signature produced by the private key associated with the public key that you're using for verification. I won't go into the details of how exactly both these functions work, but the idea is that it should be completely infeasible to find a valid signature if you don't know the secret key. Specifically, there's no strategy better than just guessing and checking random signatures, which you can check using the public key that everyone knows. Now think about how many signatures there are with a length of 256 bits. That's 2 to the power of 256. This is a stupidly large number. To call it astronomically large would be giving way too much credit to astronomy. In fact, I made a supplemental video devoted just to illustrating what a huge number this is. Right here, let's just say that when you verified that a signature against a given message is valid, you can feel extremely confident that the only way someone could have produced it is if they knew the secret key associated with the public key you used for verification. Now, making sure that people sign transactions on the ledger is pretty good, but there's one slight loophole. If Alice signs a transaction like Alice pays Bob $100, even though Bob can't forge Alice's signature on a new message, he could just copy that same line as many times as he wants. I mean, that message-signature combination remains valid. To get around this, what we do is make it so that when you sign a transaction, the message has to also include some sort of unique ID associated with that transaction. That way, if Alice pays Bob $100 multiple times, each one of those lines on the ledger requires a completely new signature. Alright, great. Digital signatures remove a huge aspect of trust in this initial protocol. But even still, If you were to really do this, you would be relying on an honor system of sorts. Namely, you're trusting that everyone will actually follow through and settle up in cash at the end of each month. What if, for example, Charlie racks up thousands of dollars in debt and just refuses to show up? The only real reason to revert back to cash to settle up is if some people, I'm looking at you, Charlie, owe a lot of money. So maybe you have the clever idea that you never actually have to settle up in cash as long as you have some way to prevent people from spending too much more than they take in. Maybe what you do is start by having everyone pay $100 into the pot, and then have the first few lines of the ledger read, Alice gets $100, Bob gets $100, Charlie gets $100, etc. Now, just don't accept any transactions where someone is spending more than they already have on that ledger. For example, if the first two transactions are Charlie pays Alice $50 and Charlie pays Bob $50, if he were to try to add Charlie pays you $20, that would be invalid as if he had never signed it. Notice, this means that verifying a transaction requires knowing the full history of transactions up to that point. And this is, more or less, also going to be true in cryptocurrencies, though there is a little room for optimization. What's interesting here is that this step removes the connection between the ledger and actual physical US dollars. In theory, if everyone in the world was using this ledger, you could live your whole life just sending and receiving money on this ledger without ever having to convert to real US dollars. In fact, to emphasize this point, let's start referring to the quantities on the ledger as ledger dollars, or LD for short. You are, of course, free to exchange ledger dollars for real US dollars. For example, maybe Alice gives Bob a $10 bill in the real world. In exchange for him adding and signing the transaction, Bob pays Alice 10 ledger dollars to this communal ledger. But exchanges like that, they're not going to be guaranteed by the protocol. It's now more analogous to how you might exchange dollars for euros or any other currency on the open market. It's just its own independent thing. This is the first important thing to understand about Bitcoin, or any other cryptocurrency. What it is a ledger. The history of transactions is the currency. Of course, with Bitcoin, money doesn't enter the ledger with people buying in using cash. I'll get to how new money enters the ledger in just a few minutes. But before that, there's actually an even more significant difference between our current system of ledger dollars and how cryptocurrencies work. So far, I've said that this ledger is in some public place, like a website where anyone can add new lines. But that would require trusting a central location, namely, who hosts the website? Who controls the rules of adding new lines? To remove that bit of trust, we'll have everybody keep their own copy of the ledger. Then when you want to make a transaction, like Alice pays Bob 100 ledger dollars, what you do is broadcast that out into the world for people to hear and to record on their own private ledgers. But unless you do something more, this system is absurdly bad. How could you get everyone to agree on what the right ledger is? When Bob receives a transaction, like Alice pays Bob 10 ledger dollars, how can he be sure that everyone else received and believes that same transaction? That he'll be able to later on go to Charlie and use those same 10 ledger dollars to make a transaction? Really, imagine yourself just listening to transactions being broadcast. How can you be sure that everyone else is recording the same transactions and in the same order? This is really the heart of the issue. This is an interesting puzzle. Can you come up with a protocol for how to accept or reject transactions, and in what order, so that you can feel confident that anyone else in the world who's following that same protocol has a personal ledger that looks the same as yours? This is the problem addressed in the original Bitcoin paper.
Arkadaşlar şu anda arkamda görmüş olduğunuz aktif bir yanardağ ve bu yanardağ az evvel patladı arkadaşlar. Şu anda gördüğünüz her yer lav içerisindeydi ve ben bu lavları üfleye üfleye söndürdüm. Hatta bir ara 3 tane küçük kaplumbağa gördüm arkadaşlar. Onları kurtarabilmek için devasa bir kaya parçasını taşımak durumunda kaldım. Hazır kaldırmışken şöyle biraz arka kol çalıştım.
Yok artık. Biz abarttık ama.
Ya biliyorum sosunu abarttınız, kekini kabarttınız. Çok güzel dankek magma. Bayılıyoruz. Ama bırakın biz de biraz abartalım yani. Bizim de öyle bir hakkımız olsun yani.
Bir
Zaten buraya da yazmışsınız. Tosunu abarttık ve kekini kabarttık. Bu arada her an tekrar patlayabilir. Bizim hızlıca buradan uzaklaşmamız lazım.
Yenilenen Elidor 7/24 şekillendirici bakım kremleriyle belirgin bukleler, onarılmış sağlıklı görünüm ve elektriklenmeyen parlak saçlar 7/24 hep seninle.
Original coin paper. At a high level, the solution that Bitcoin offers is to trust whichever ledger has the most computational work put into it. I'll take a moment to explain exactly what that means. It involves this thing called a cryptographic hash function. The general idea that we'll build to is that if you use computational work as a basis for what to trust, you can make it so that fraudulent transactions and conflicting ledgers would require an infeasible amount of computation to bring about. Again, I'll remind you that this is getting well into the weeds beyond what anyone would need to know just to use a currency like this. But it's a really cool idea, and if you understand it, you understand the heart of Bitcoin and of other cryptocurrencies. So first things first, what's a hash function? The inputs for one of these functions can be any kind of message or file. It really doesn't matter. And the output is a string of bits with some kind of fixed length, like 256 bits. This output is called the hash or the digest of the message, and the intent is that it looks random. It's not random. It always gives the same output for a given input. But the idea is that if you slightly change the input, maybe editing just one of the characters, the resulting hash changes completely. In fact, for the hash function that I'm showing here, called SHA-256, the way the output changes as you slightly change that input is entirely unpredictable. You see, this is not just any hash function. It's a cryptographic hash function. That means it's infeasible to compute in the reverse direction. If I show you some string of ones and zeros and ask you to find an input so that the SHA-256 hash of that input gives this exact string of bits, you will have no better method than to just guess and check. And again, if you want a feel for how much computation would be needed to go through 2 to the 256 guesses, just take a look at the supplement video. I actually had way too much fun writing that thing. You might think that if you just really dig into the details of how exactly this function works, you could reverse engineer the appropriate input without having to guess and check. But no one has ever figured out a way to do that. Interestingly, there's no cold, hard, rigorous proof that it's hard to compute in the reverse direction. And yet, a huge amount of modern security depends on cryptographic hash functions and the idea that they have this property. If you were to look at what algorithms underlie the secure connection that your browser is making with YouTube right now, or that it makes with your bank, you will likely see the name SHA-256 show up in there. For right now, our focus will just be on how such a function can prove that a particular list of transactions is associated with a large amount of computational effort. Imagine someone shows you a list of transactions, and they say, "Hey, I found a special number so that when you put that number at the end of this list of transactions and apply SHA-256 to the entire thing, the first 30 bits of that output are all zeros." How hard do you think it was for them to find that number? Well, for a random message, the probability that a hash happens to start with 30 successive zeros is 1 in 2 to the 30, which is about 1 in a billion. And because SHA-256 is a cryptographic hash function, the only way to find a special number like that is just guessing and checking. So this person almost certainly had to go through about 1 billion different numbers before finding this special one. And once you know that number, it's really quick to verify. You just run the hash and see that there are 30 zeros. So in other words, you can verify that they went through a large amount of work, but without having to go through that same effort yourself. This is called a proof of work. And importantly, all of this work is intrinsically tied to the list of transactions. If you change one of those transactions, even slightly, it would completely change the hash. So you'd have to go through another billion guesses to find a new proof of work, a new number that makes it so that the hash of the altered list together with this new number starts with 30 zeros. So now think back to our distributed ledger situation. Everyone is there broadcasting transactions, and we want a way for them to agree on what the correct ledger is. As I said, the core idea behind the original Bitcoin paper is to have everyone trust whichever ledger has the most work put into it. The way this works is to first organize a given ledger into blocks, where each block consists of a list of transactions together with a proof of work. That is, a special number so that the hash of the whole block starts with a bunch of zeros. For the moment, let's say that it has to start with, 60 zeros, but later we'll return back to a more systematic way you might want to choose that number. In the same way that a transaction is only considered valid when it's signed by the sender, a block is only considered valid if it has a proof of work. And also, to make sure that there's a standard order to these blocks, we'll make it so that a block has to contain the hash of the previous block at its header. That way, if you were to go back and change any one of the blocks, or to swap the order of two blocks, it would change the block that comes after it, which changes that block's hash, which changes the one that comes after it, and so on. That would require redoing all of the work, finding a new special number for each of these blocks that makes their hashes start with 60 zeros. Because blocks are chained together like this, instead of calling it a ledger, it's common to call it a blockchain. As part of our updated protocol, we'll now allow anyone in the world to be a block creator. What that means is that they're going to listen for transactions being broadcast, collect them into some block, and then do a whole bunch of work to find a special number that makes the hash of that block start with 60 zeros. And once they find it, they broadcast out the block that they found. To reward a block creator for all this work, when she puts together a block, we'll allow her to include a very special transaction at the top of it, in which she gets, say, 10 ledger dollars out of thin air. This is called the block reward, and it's an exception to our usual rules about whether or not to accept transactions. It doesn't come from anyone, so it doesn't have to be signed. And it also means that the total number of ledger dollars in our economy increases with each new block. Creating blocks is often called mining, since it requires doing a lot of work, and it introduces new bits of currency into the economy. But when you hear or read about miners, keep in mind that what they're really doing is listening for transactions, creating blocks, broadcasting those blocks, and getting rewarded with new money for doing so. From the miner's perspective, each block is kind of like a miniature lottery, where everyone is guessing numbers as fast as they can until one lucky individual finds a special number that makes the hash of the block start with many zeros, and they get the reward. For anyone else who just wants to use this system to make payments, instead of listening for transactions, they all start listening just for blocks being broadcast by miners and updating their own personal copies of the blockchain. Now, the key addition to our protocol is that if you hear two distinct blockchains with conflicting transaction histories, you defer to the longest one, the one with the most work put into it. If there's a tie, just wait until you hear an additional block that makes one of them longer. So even though there's no central authority and everyone is maintaining their own copy of the blockchain, if everyone agrees to give preference to whichever blockchain has the most work put into it, we have a way to arrive at decentralized consensus. To see why this makes for a trustworthy system, and to understand at what point you should trust that a payment is legit, it's actually really helpful to walk through exactly what it would take to fool someone using this system. Maybe Alice is trying to fool Bob with a fraudulent block. Namely, she tries to send him one that includes her paying him 100 ledger dollars, but without broadcasting that block to the rest of the network. That way, everyone else still thinks that she has those 100 ledger dollars. To do this, she would have to find a valid proof of work before all of the other miners, each working on their own block. And that could definitely happen. Maybe Alice just happens to win this miniature lottery before everyone else. But Bob is still going to be hearing the broadcasts made by other miners. So to keep him believing this fraudulent block, Alice would have to do all of the work herself to keep adding blocks on this special fork in Bob's blockchain that's different from what he's hearing from the rest of the miners. Remember, as per the protocol, Bob always trusts the longest chain that he knows about. Alice might be able to keep this up for a few blocks if, just by chance, she happens to find blocks more quickly than the rest of the miners on the network all combined. But unless she has close to 50% of the computing resources among all of the miners, the probability becomes overwhelming that the blockchain that all of the other miners are working on grows faster than the single fraudulent blockchain that Alice is feeding to Bob. So, after enough time, Bob's just going to reject what he's hearing from Alice in favor of the longer chain that everyone else is working on. Notice, that means that you shouldn't necessarily trust a new block that you hear immediately. Instead, you should wait for several new blocks to be added on top of it. If you still haven't heard of any longer blockchains, you can trust that this block is part of the same chain that everyone else is using. And with that, we've hit all the main ideas. This distributed ledger system, based on a proof of work, is more or less how the Bitcoin protocol works, and how many other cryptocurrencies work. There's just a few details to clear up. Earlier, I said that the proof of work might be to find a special number so that the hash of the block starts with 60 zeros. Well, the way the actual Bitcoin protocol works is to periodically change that number of zeros so that it should take, on average, 10 minutes to find a new block. So as there are more and more miners added to the network, the challenge actually gets harder and harder in such a way that this miniature lottery only has about one winner every 10 minutes. Many newer cryptocurrencies actually have much shorter block times than that. And all of the money in Bitcoin ultimately comes from some block reward. In the beginning, these rewards were 50 Bitcoin per block. There's actually a great website you can go to called Block Explorer that makes it easy to look through the Bitcoin blockchain. And if you look at the very first few blocks on the chain, they contain no transactions other than that 50 Bitcoin reward to the miner. But every 210,000 blocks, which is about every 4 years, that reward gets cut in half. So right now, the reward is 12.5 Bitcoin per block. And because this reward decreases geometrically over time, it means there will never be more than 21 million Bitcoin in existence. However, this doesn't mean that miners will stop earning money. In addition to the block reward, miners can also pick up transaction fees. The way this works is that whenever you make a payment, you can purely optionally include a little transaction fee with it that's going to go to the miner of whichever block includes that payment. The reason you might do that is to incentivize miners to actually include the transaction that you broadcast into the next block. You see, in Bitcoin, each block is limited to about 2,400 transactions, which many critics argue is unnecessarily restrictive. For comparison, Visa processes an average of about 1,700 transactions per second, and they're capable of handling more than 24,000 per second. This comparatively slow processing on Bitcoin makes for higher transaction fees, since that's what determines which transactions miners choose to include in a new block. All of this is far from a comprehensive coverage of cryptocurrencies. There are still many nuances and alternate design choices that I haven't even touched. But my hope is that this can provide a stable wait but why style tree trunk of understanding for anyone looking to add a few more branches with further reading. Like I said at the start, one of the motives behind this is that a lot of money has started flowing towards cryptocurrencies. And even though I don't want to make any claims about whether that's a good or bad investment, I really do think that it's healthy for people getting into the game to at least know the fundamentals of the technology. As always, my sincerest thanks to those of you making this channel possible on Patreon. I understand that not everyone is in a position to contribute, but if you're still interested in helping out, one of the best ways to do that is simply to share videos that you think might be interesting or helpful to others. I know you know that, but it really does help.
Yeni Sensodyne klinik beyazlıkta aradığın beyazlık ve hassasiyet koruması tek bir üründe. Çiçek sepetinde lezzet dolu çikolatalar, şık kutuları ve aynı gün teslim seçeneğiyle seni bekliyor.
The blockchain is a term that has come to mean many things to many people. For developers, it is a set of protocols and encryption technologies for securely storing data on a distributed network. For business and finance, it is a distributed ledger and the technology underlying the explosion of new digital currencies. For technologists, it is the driving force behind the next generation of the internet. For others, it is a tool for radically reshaping society and economy, taking us into a more decentralized world. Whichever way you look at it, blockchain has become a term that captures the imagination and fascinates many, as the implications of such technology are truly profound. For the first time in human history, people anywhere can trust each other and transact within large peer-to-peer networks without centralized management. Trust is established not by centralized institutions, but by protocols, cryptography, and computer code. This greatly strengthens our capacity for collaboration and cooperation between organizations and individuals within peer networks, enabling us to potentially form global networks of collaboration without centralized formal institutions. Unprecedented, but hugely relevant in an age of globalization and a new set of 21st century challenges that require mass collaboration. The blockchain is a complex technological, economic, and social phenomenon. It calls into question what might have seemed to be established parameters of the modern world like currency, economics, trust, value, and exchange. To make sense of this, one needs to understand it in a holistic context all the way from its technicalities to its aspirational potential. This course is designed to do exactly that, by giving a 360-degree overview to the different dimensions of the technology, its potential application within various industries, and its far-reaching implications for society and economy. In the first section of the course, we give an overview to the blockchain both on a technical and non-technical level. We also discuss the importance of the blockchain within the context of the emerging next-generation internet. In the second section, we talk about the blockchain as a so-called trust machine and how it enables transparency and collaboration. We will look at distributed ledger technology, talking about smart contracts, Ethereum, and decentralized applications. In the third section, we introduce you to the workings of token economies, illustrating how the blockchain and distributed ledgers can work to build vibrant ecosystems through the use of tokens to incentivize behavior. In the last section of the course, we will be looking at specific applications of the blockchain to economy, society, technology, and environment, looking at both existing practical applications and potential future applications. The blockchain is a so-called emerging technology that is currently experiencing very rapid evolution. Within the space of just 2 or 3 years, it has already gone through changes in its technical implementation and our understanding of what it is and can be. As such, our aim is to future-proof this course by not dwelling excessively on existing technical implementations, but presenting a more conceptual understanding of the blockchain within the broader process of change of the emerging next-generation internet. The blockchain is much more than a technology. It is also a culture and community that is passionate about creating a more equitable world through decentralization. It is a movement to disrupt the disruptors, to redesign the internet, and in so doing, shake up existing centralized incumbents. Throughout the course, we will introduce you to this culture and its aspirations. This course is non-technical in nature. It is an introductory course, and thus all terms will be explained. It should be accessible to anyone with a basic understanding of web technologies and economics.
In this video, we're going to give a high-level overview looking at the primary dimensions of this technology that we call the blockchain. We'll first talk about the underlying technology, then the distributed ledgers that this technology supports, then the token economies that can be built on top of that ledger system. We'll only touch upon these topics here to get an overview before going into them in more detail in future videos. On its most basic level, the blockchain is a new class of information technology that combines cryptography with distributed.
Yepyeni enerji içeceği Sting. Lezzeti kırmızı meyve aromasından gelir, modunu yükseltir. Sting, Sting, ver coşkuyu. Sting, Sting, ver coşkuyu.
Şık şık şık şık şık bir tarzla şık şık şık şık şehirde moda şık şık şık şık şık bir tarzla şık şık şık şık şehirde moda. Yol yol yol yol sonbahardan yollayalım sonbahardan. fotoğraf yollayalım.
Combines cryptography with distributed computing, both of which have existed for a number of decades. It was the genius of Satoshi Nakamoto to combine them in new ways, to create a model where a network of computers collaborate towards maintaining a shared and secure database. As such, we can say the blockchain as a technology is simply a distributed, secure database. This database consists of a string of blocks, each one a record of data that has been encrypted and given a unique identifier called a hash. Mining computers on the network validate transactions, add them to the block they're building, and then broadcast the completed block to other nodes so that all have a copy of the database. Because there is no centralized component to verify the alterations to the database, the blockchain depends upon a distributed consensus algorithm. In order to make an entry onto the blockchain database, all the computers have to agree about its state, so that no one computer can make an alteration without the consensus of others. Once completed, a block goes into the blockchain as a permanent record. Each time a block gets completed, a new one is generated. There is a countless number of such blocks in the blockchain, all connected to each other like links in a chain in proper, linear, chronological order. The blockchain was designed so that transactions are immutable, meaning they cannot be deleted. Each block contains a hash value that is dependent upon the hash of the previous block. So they're all linked together, meaning if one is changed, then all the other blocks linked to it going forwards will be altered. This works to make the data entered tamper-proof. What we've described here is the workings of the first generation of blockchains, which function largely simply as databases. But the technology is currently evolving to become much more than this, as the second generation already provides the capacity to execute any computer code on the blockchain. The system is evolving to become a globally distributed cloud computing infrastructure, and as we'll discuss in a future video, it remains very much a work in progress when seen from this perspective. Blockchain technology works to create a permanent and secure database. This makes blockchains suitable for the storage of a record or transaction that involves value or in some way needs to be a secure and trusted source of information. These secure, distributed records are called distributed ledgers. A distributed ledger is a consensus of replicated, shared, and synchronized digital data geographically dispersed across multiple sites, countries, or institutions without centralized administration or centralized data storage, being maintained instead by a distributed network of computers. Such ledgers can be used for any form of asset registry, such as inventory or monetary transactions. This might include the recording of hard assets, such as physical property, cars, homes, etc., or intangible assets such as currencies, patents, votes, identity, healthcare data, or any other form of valuable information. This distributed ledger technology enables us to replace a multiplicity of private databases within each organization with one shared database that is trusted and accessible by all parties involved. In this respect, the blockchain enables trust between parties that may otherwise not trust each other. The results greatly strengthen our capacity for collaboration between organizations or between individuals peer-to-peer without dependency on third-party centralized institutions. Likewise, they result in transparency and many other efficiencies. This is of major significance, as we currently have many centralized organizations that may be internally optimized, but the inter-organizational space in between them is really inefficient, with huge amounts of border friction, redundancy, arbitrage, and resources wasted on competition. By enabling trusted inter-organizational networks, these ledgers enable the formation of organization and collaboration where previously there was none, such as across whole supply chains, or for different healthcare providers to collaborate around the patient's needs, or for different transport providers to collaborate in delivering an integrated logistics network. Likewise, second-generation blockchains offer the possibility to automate the workings of these networks through what we call smart contracts. Smart contracts are computer code that is stored inside a blockchain, which encode contractual agreements. These smart contracts are self-executing contracts, with the terms of the agreement or operation directly written into lines of code, which are stored and executed on the blockchain. Like normal computer programs, these containers hold algorithms that take an input of data and, depending on the value of the input, trigger certain events. For example, this might be a financial contract that takes as the input the amount of money in a person's accounts. If it is above a certain level, then it increases the interest rate that they earn on their deposit. Such smart contracts can be used for automating many basic operations on the network, once again working to remove the need for intermediary third-party institutions, as smart contracts can be trusted, are tamper-proof, and execute automatically. Much of the current discussion surrounding blockchain remains at the level of the technology and the possibilities of distributed ledgers, as a shared, trusted database enabling the collaboration between organizations, with the resulting disintermediation of centralized institutions and market exchanges. However, its implications go far beyond this, as the blockchain concept is more than just a database or ledger. It is a new organizing paradigm for the discovery, validation, and transfer of all discrete units of value and the development of distributed organizations via token market systems. A token is a quantified unit of value that is recorded on the blockchain. This value may be of any kind. It may be likes on social media, it might be a currency, it might be the integrity of an ecosystem, or it might be an electrical unit. Token networks consist of a network of independent nodes that act autonomously, but through incentive structures and the signaling system of the market, self-organize to create emergent coordination and thus a distributed management system. For example, we might create a clean air token, where anyone who provides a service that contributes to the maintenance and provision of clean air can earn tokens. For example,
Doğduğu günden beri bebeğiniz size her şeyden daha çok güveniyor. Siz de pediatristlerin 1 numaralı tercihine güvenin. Yeni Prima Premium Care, ıslaklığı 2 kata kadar hızlı emer ve cildi kuru tutar. Pişiye karşı korumaya da yardımcı olur. Onun narin cildi için 1 numaralı cilt korumamız Yeni Prima Premium Care'de.
Earn tokens, for example by planting a tree, while those who pollute, by say operating a combustion engine, have to pay in air tokens. Thus, instead of having a centralized authority and a Clean Air Act, we have a token market that works to create signals that align people's incentives with maintaining and growing the underlying resource. Likewise, this same model could be applied to the management of technology infrastructure. As an example, we could think of traffic control. We currently have traffic control systems in cities whose operations are monitored by centralized control centers. But in a world of autonomous vehicles and the blockchain, cars could signal to each other, peer-to-peer, bidding tokens to see which gets priority. In such a way, the system has dynamically allocated resources and self-organized via distributed token networks. In short, blockchain is not just an information technology, but also an institutional technology, in that it enables us to design incentive structures in the form of token economies, and in such a way convert centralized organizations into distributed markets via token economics. This is where things start to get quite complex as you move into the realm of designing economies and incentive systems for coordinating human activity in a decentralized fashion, something that could potentially enable the coordination of human activity at a much larger scale than has been possible before. The great design innovation of the blockchain is really its capacity to coordinate a network of autonomous nodes towards maintaining a shared infrastructure. And this is done not just through innovations in information technology, but also through the design of incentive systems, which has traditionally been the domain of economics. Through adding a layer of trust and value exchange to the internet, the blockchain merges our newly developed information networks with the institutional structures that sit on top of them. In so doing, it greatly strengthens the capacity of those networks as a new mode for organizing society and economy. By merging economics and technology, it enables us to redesign institutional structures and ultimately reconceptualize how we organize virtually every aspect of society, economy, and even technology infrastructure based on networks of autonomous nodes that are incentivized to collaborate. Of course, it does not do this alone. Such claims can only be realized in combination with other technologies and broader processes of change. As such, the blockchain has to be understood in the context of a broader set of technological transformations taking place with the current evolution of the internet. Most notably, much of what the blockchain promises will only be possible given parallel developments in the Internet of Things, datafication and advanced analytics, all of which are combining to form the next generation of internet, of which the blockchain will be a critical infrastructure. In this video, we're going to talk about the basics of the blockchain as a technology. On its most basic level, the blockchain can be understood as a new kind of database. At least this was its original design. What's different about this database is that it's distributed. Digital databases have been around for a while now, but until recently, they've been designed to centralize information on one computer or within one organization. The blockchain, though, uses a distributed network of computers to maintain a shared database. The blockchain is then a set of protocols and encryption methods that enable a network of computers to work together in securely recording data within a shared open database. This database consists of a series of encrypted blocks that contain the data. The blockchain is a continuously growing list of these blocks of data, which are linked and secured using cryptography. This makes it a trusted database, with this trust being maintained by open, secure computer code and encryption instead of any single institution. The database stores information in blocks that are linked together through hash values, with entries to this database being made by computers that all have a copy of the database and all must come to consensus about its state before they can update it. So these are three central concepts to understanding the system's workings: that of blocks and hashing, mining and proof of work, and distributed consensus. We'll go over each of these separately. In terms of its structure, a blockchain may be considered as a series of blocks of data that are securely chained together. New blocks are formed as participants create new data or wish to update existing data. These blocks are encrypted and given a hash value that represents a unique identifier of the data within that block. This hashing works by a standard algorithm being run over the block's data to compress it into a code, which is called the hash, which is unique to that document. No matter how large the file or what information is contained, it is compressed into a 64-character secure hash. This hash value can be recalculated from the underlying file, confirming that the original contents have not changed, but the reverse is not possible. Given just the hash value, you cannot recreate the block's data contained within it, which is encrypted. All blocks of data which are formed after the first block are securely chained to the previous one. This means that the hash value of the next block in the chain is dependent upon the previous one. Thus, once recorded, the data in any given block cannot be altered afterwards without the alteration of all subsequent blocks. As well as this hash pointer linking to the previous block, each block typically contains as well a timestamp so that we know what happened and when it happened. This hashing and linking of blocks makes them inherently resistant to the modification of their data, making them immutable records. You can only write data to the database, and once it's there, it's very hard to change, almost impossible. Thus, data stored on the blockchain is